My name is Johnston, and this is my story. I was raised in Spartanburg, South Carolina, and I had awesome parents. We were a Christian family, and my parents preached and practiced family fellowship. Every night we ate dinner together. We went to church as a family together. My dad coached our Little League teams, and my mom was a teacher and was involved in all of our school activities. All the foundations for success were laid at a young age. As I grew older in high school and college, I had a short-sighted vision. I couldn't focus on eternity, and at that time I didn't know what it truly meant to have a relationship with the Lord. When I went to college, 3 important things happened. I made the decision to join the service when I graduated. I met Ainsley, who would eventually become my wife, and the attacks on America happened on September 11th. I knew on September 11th that as an infantry officer that I'd eventually see combat. And that was hard, being that Ainsley and I's relationship was at a very young stage. When I graduated college, our relationship was just a few months old, and I had to look at her and tell her that I'd be back in 4 years. That was a hard pill to swallow, and I really began to think that life was unfair. I'd wake up every day just hoping that the next day would come as we marked the days off the calendar till we would soon be together. The summer between her junior and senior year, she came out to visit me. I was stationed in Hawaii, where I would serve for 1 year before my deployment to Iraq. She came out to visit, and we had a long talk, and we decided that we were going to get married. And those years soon turned into a countdown of months. Once that decision was made, we began the plans for our wedding, and shortly thereafter, my orders were given to me to deploy to Iraq for an indefinite time period. I remember sitting in Hawaii, which would be most people's paradise. It was my own prison. I was sitting on a couch one night, and my shoulders were slumped and my head was down, and I just felt that life wasn't fair. It wasn't the fact of going to Iraq. I was okay with that. It was the fact that Ainsley and I would be apart again. I didn't know how to ask the Lord to save me, but I knew I needed to be saved. I had a vision of my wife in the future holding our child. And I just told the Lord that I wanted to see that. And I asked him that if he would save me, if he would show me that, if he'd let me experience that I'd serve him the rest of my life. Within an instant, the Spirit came into me. I was saved. I immediately went to my computer. I sent an email to Ainsley and my family. I told them that I was okay with what was going on, that I knew that this was my moment in time, that this is what the Lord wanted me to be doing now, that I don't know why, but He wants me to go to Iraq. He wants me to lead the 33-man platoon I was leading into combat, and that's what He wants, and I will do it with the full heart. I was at peace with it. I knew that when I came home, I would be with Ainsley forever. I knew that we would have children. I'd be able to look them in the eyes and tell them what I'd done for them during my time serving our country. I also knew that there's only 2 ways to leave Iraq, and I knew either way I left, I would go home, whether it be here on earth or in heaven, and I was at peace with that. So I went to Iraq. I was there for 10 months, and the one mistake I made when I was saved is that I didn't know how to share that new experience with other believers. I didn't know how to fellowship. And like a fire, when you fan it, the fire grows. If you let it smolder, it will eventually go out. And since I didn't know how to share it, it was just smoldering inside of me, though I was trying. 10 months into our deployment, my best friend was killed. And though I didn't know it at the time, my faith began to spiral out of control. I began to think again that it was all up to me, that I had to control my own destiny. And day by day, I just slipped a little. I did come home. I married my wife. We moved back to Columbia. And by earthly standards, life was great. We had a great marriage. We loved each other. We had great jobs. We had a great house. We had great friends. We were serving our community. But there was always just something missing, and I didn't know how to put my finger on it. In 2010, a few years after coming out of the service, some great things happened. I remember looking at my wife on January 1st. We were watching the Rose Bowl. And I said, Ainsley, I have 4 goals this year. And they were 4 large goals to accomplish. And she kind of laughed at me and said, you know, that'll be great. One of those goals is that I was going to read the Bible that year. Each year before I'd tried, I'd run into some difficulties and hadn't been able to finish, but that year I stuck to it. And each morning I'd wake up at 5:30 and I'd read the Bible, and the Lord began to do amazing things in my life. He began to bring other believers in my life who taught me to grow in my faith, who taught me to share my faith, and my relationship with the Lord really grew. Later in 2010, I was reading a book, Unbroken, about Louis Zampini. And Louis, there were some similarities. He was a World War II pilot. I by no means went through the hardships he did. But on a search and rescue mission over the Pacific, his plane was shot down, and he floated in the Pacific with his crew for weeks. There they were, surrounded by water, but they had no water to drink, and they were about to die of dehydration. And he looked at the Lord, he looked to the heavens, and he said, "If you give me water, I will serve you the rest of my life." The next day it rained, and they had water to drink. They prayed again, and it rained again. Eventually they were taken captive by the Japanese. They served in a POW camp. He came home after the war. He married, he had a job, he was back in America. But there was always something missing. A few years later, his wife took him to a revival from Billy Graham. And towards the end of the book, I'm reading about his experience at the revival, and the words on the page just began to jump out on me. And I could feel Louis' heart racing, and my heart started racing. As Billy Graham told him, he said, what God wants from man is faith. He wants man to have faith in the Lord. And Louis stood up to walk out of the tent, and it hit him like a bolt of lightning. He looked towards the heavens, and he remembered that long time ago, that promise, that prayer that was lifted up to heaven, that if the Lord would save him, he would serve him the rest of his life. I set the book down, and I remembered that night in Hawaii when I was sitting on the couch, where all I wanted was to come home and see my wife with our children. I laid the book down. My wife was laying beside me asleep. My oldest son was in the room beside us asleep. I closed my eyes, and I thanked the Lord for everything He'd given me. I'd asked for forgiveness for forgetting that promise, and I told Him right there I would surrender and serve Him the rest of my life. Since then, no day has been perfect, but I know what perfection looks like, and I strive for it every day. I'm Johnston, and I'm a follower of Jesus Christ.